How's it?
Morning, everyone. How are you doing today? How's things going with your compositions? Everyone doing all right?
I laugh every time a lecturer asks me how the work is going.
Slowly but surely, Rowan says. Well, Bernard, we have to ask you.
It just hurts.
Yeah,
It hurts a lot.
don't worry. Level 4 should bring supplies of computers, so you should be able to fix things.
Hopefully,
Oh,
I can get the money for that.
Was he?
Yes. Do you know Lawrence's email address? Like, if anybody knows.
Lawrence@mne.co.za.
Okay, thanks. Because I'm having problems with my Pro Tools on Windows. It
Yeah,
says
just mail him, eh?
okay.
Yeah.
So it's like if I can just try once again to try and fix this, because I'm a little behind because of the software issues that I've had.
Yeah. I mean, guys, if you've got any problems, hey, just post it on the third year group or APP group, eh? If you guys get stuck, don't just sit there and wait. You know, just put it on there. It's much faster to work that way.
I just want to double check real quick. Lawrence is spelled Lorenz, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, guys, I'm gonna share my screen with you. So today we will be discussing the Baroque composition. You'll see I've added already quite a bit of things for you guys. You should be able. Can you guys see my screen? Yes, thank you, Jock. Okay, so let's get going. So there's a few things we'll discuss the TV opening title at the end. So it's a few things we need to discuss regarding the Baroque composition. You'll see the composers' names are going to become more familiar to you. I've given you guys this introduction so you can go and read about this. Of course, the most notable composer is Johann Sebastian Bach. He would have written over 1,000 works. Now, it's not 1,000 compositions. So let's say, for example, like this in John's Passion, which is like almost 3 hours long, would be one work. So he wrote over 1,000 works. I think it's 1,008 or something like that. And they said if they get a professional copyist to copy his work, it would take them 8 years for 8 hours a day to copy non-stop. So, and he had to compose this. And if you see my analysis, you'll see that his music is rather complex. One thing that we saw from last week that is starting to really take hold is opera. So you'll see things like larger scale works become fashionable, and no one better than to do this than George Friedrich Handel. He's a German composer who moved to England, and he wrote many of the famous tunes that is used in British ceremonies. Water and fire music, all sorts of things like that. He's famous for that. And in fact, in his time, they had there was one occasion where they had 2,000 choir members and 1,000 orchestral members. So they had a massive thing in Britain. we'll quickly look at these composers as well today. So the styles that going to continue. So opera is going to become very, very fashionable. So music for the aristocracy and beginning for the public as well. You'll start to see is common. Then you've got this thing called the concerto grosso. So I've given you guys, all of these are hyperlinks, so you can just click on them. And the concerto grosso is interesting because it's the start of the symphony, actually, as we know it. And there's a few important things. You'll see that Howard Goodall will discusses this in his video as well. What is going to happen? You've got a thing called piano, and so essentially, grosso means big. So you've got orchestra. Let's say they are small size. And what's going to happen? You've got this orchestra against usually like 3 players. So you might have 2 violinists and a cellist, and they're going to alternate. So you've got this texture shift, and eventually this will develop into the concerto where you've got one single soloist that will be transformed into the soloist will play then against the whole orchestra. So the concerto grosso is the sort of prototype that we find. You'll see we've got various dance styles, and what happens with these ones is very important historical development is all of these different, there's many more by the way, all of these classic dance forms, composers start to take these dance form and take the rhythms and take the ideas from it, and they extrapolate. And they're not writing dance music. I've got to make this very clear. So it's not dance music. It's music that you listen to, but it has dance elements. And we'll see this all the way through to our current age. So if you think of a lot of composers, it takes from the Spanish lineage. For example, take things like bolero or habanero, and they draw things, but it's not for dance music per se. And here you can see Bach has made use of these, and you'll see Handel does it as well. Let's see if you guys have got any questions. Now I'll open your quiz, don't worry. Sorry, I haven't gotten around to your quiz. Okay, so we've got these dance styles. We're going to listen to them in a moment. And in vocal, we've got now 2 new ones. So oratorio is, for example, you'll see these ones. So opera would be used in a secular setting. So these deal with all sorts of secular topics, where, say, for example, oratorio and cantata, they will deal with more sacred things. So these would be, this essentially, oratorio is an opera, but is in a church setting. So they won't have costumes and things like that. But it essentially is the same musical style. It's just without all the extra things and only deals with religious topics. Now let's quickly listen to a piece or two. How about we try some Bach? You guys know this piece? Musical development perspective, the organ now is fully fledged, and you'll see it's got many stops. So these pipes we call stops, and they the organ, until the telephone system was invented, the telephone network, the organ was the most complex single man-made object in the world. So these pipes are also known as ranks. Big organs can have up to 9,000 ranks. So every pipe is one note on the keyboard. So you can imagine, let's say you've got 61 notes on the keyboard, and some of them can go much lower and much higher. You can see here, for example, they're all changed, and there would be hundreds and hundreds at the back as well, and all around. So this type of work, you'll see Bach was an excellent organist, one of the foremost organists, and the change of color is very important. One thing that you'll see that's typical of this time period, you hear like here, I'll just play you this start again. There's no change in dynamics. The only way that dynamics changes by adding more notes. called manuals. So you've got, in this case, 3 manuals. You get ones with many more. Then this type of chord is nicknamed pyramid chord. You can just stack the notes on top of each other. You can't keep it in tune. So let's go forward a little bit. She's playing with his feet. There's some people who can play faster with their feet than you could play with your fingers. So people are very skilled. Now, this type of music, you can start here, becomes very virtuosic. Okay, so this type very common for the Brock. So essentially, if you think of the line of progression, music becomes more and more and more complex, and the skill that the player requires. So in other words, the training and the amount of practice, the instrument builders have to make better instruments because the players require and the composers require a greater level of control. So this will just continue and continue regarding the development of instruments. You can see a piece like this has already got a lot of complex harmony. It's using a lot of different rhythms. So let's quickly see. I've got another one, and it's by Bach. I'll play water music in a moment. Where's Bach as well? Oh, there it is. Okay. Now, this specific work by Bach is the Well-Tempered Clavier. Now, there's 2 books. The way it works is he wrote in basically a piece for major and minor in all 12 keys, and he did this twice. This will give you 48 pieces. Now, the reason why this is a very important thing in the historical development, there's a concept called the equal temperament, and equal temperament is where you've got all 12 notes that's equally distant from each other. So you guys will, in your research that you will need to give me in your essays, you'll need to write to me things about the this. I'll give you guys some additional documents about equal temperament, because what would have happened before this period, and by the way, equal temperament is a concept that was developed actually in China, was rejected there, and was exported to the West. So the world has influenced in many different ways. So what Bach did is this new mathematical concept came out, and he thought, wow, this is great. You can now modulate from any key to any key, and it's going to sound fine. Because before this, what would have happened is, if there was no equal temperament, you would go from one key, you would modulate, and you'd find, wow, you're quite out of tune. So because the notes are not equally spaced. So what instrument makers did before this, they would tune instruments, but they will space them for a specific key. Let's say they tune it to C, but now, for example, you play in C sharp, you're going to have a difference. And there's quite a lot of these scales. So there's just intonation, Weimeister. There's literally probably 20 common historical tunings that you'll find. Any questions? Okay, so let's listen to, I'll put this one in for you guys as well. So this is Bach, where he's exploring these scales, or the temperament that's now available to us. So let's quickly have a listen. I'm sure you guys have heard this one before. So this would be piece 1 in book 1, and you can see 53 more minutes, that would be book 1. So then you can hear the music very complex, contrapuntal, developed suetite. You can hear it's very percussive as well. Now, what's interesting about Bach is that a lot of his music was forgotten for nearly 100 years. Composers knew about his music, but it wasn't performed much. So they would study the scores. So someone like Mozart and Beethoven, they all studied Bach. But his music wasn't performed for a long time now. There's another famous composer called Felix Mendelssohn, and I think it was in 1840. He performed St. John's Passion almost 100 years after it was written. And from that point, Bach just became more and more prominent. And actually, after World War II, Bach really rose to become the great composer that people regard him as today. By the way, many people regard Bach as one of the greatest people who has ever lived. He had 23 children. He taught mathematics and Latin whilst writing 1,000 works in his lifetime. So a very, very busy guy. And of course, he was an organist, so he would perform organ. He would perform all of these works in the church where he worked in Leipzig. So there's quite a prolific man. And so I'd highly recommend. He's the quintessential Baroque composer, and he's done every style except for opera. So Bach has done every imaginable style during that period except for opera. Okay, you guys are rather quiet today. So let's look at some common compositional ideas. So you'll see there's ornamentation forms a big part. So you'll see this is a layout of all sorts of indications. Now, there's many of these are standard. Say, for example, mordant and trill. Trill we indicate differently now of TR. But say, for example, Bach would have made use of so many different ones. There is a few more actually, but ones that we use in common time. In our time is, for example, a mordant, and you get two types of mordants. This one is the downward mordant. So, for example, you have C, B, C, and if it was without the line through it, it would be C, D, C. So all of these, I would highly recommend that you incorporate these into your composition, because if you don't, then you're going to lack that sense of ornateness. Now, if we look at maybe some, I think we should have a look at some art quickly. So I'll quickly show you guys some Baroque art. Do you guys know what the meaning of Baroque is? Any ideas about Baroque means? No, not really. Okay. Now, actually, during their period of time, they didn't call it the Baroque, because it's like when you're busy, it's like today. What do you call today? I'll tell you later what we call today. But later on, art critics called it Baroque, because Baroque means deformed information era. No, not at all. We live in an information era. Actually, if you want to know, we live in the postmodern era. So I'll explain that when we get to the modern era. So we live in postmodern times. Modern not having to do anything with meaning current today. There's a whole thing. I'll explain when we get to week 12. So Baroque means deformed pearl, and the reason for it, if you look at, say, some of their art, you'll start to see it has many features. And say, if, for example, we look at, say, Baroque architecture, the thing about this is how can I explain? The amount of frills, trills, and simply over the topness. If you look at these, for example, you'll see that we've got, it's opulent, it's beyond necessary. So if you look at all of these palaces, this is an excellent example of how Baroque architecture will work. And of course, as I told you guys already last week, that music's always going to copy it. So you can see it's extremely ornate, extremely detailed, very excessive. And so the music's going to have this same quality to it. So a lot of trills and frills. And of course, we put counterpoint on top of that. Okay, so Baroque deformed pearl. So they didn't mean it in a good way. So please incorporate these into your compositions. Then you'll see, for example, we've got a concept called terrace dynamics. I already explained this in the analysis video, but I'll explain it again. What happens is, let's say, for example, you decide your piece is going to be played loud and soft, because these instruments, they're not so well developed yet. So it's not easy always to have super refinement. So you're going to choose 2 levels, and what you do is you compose for a long period of time in a block. And then, for example, if you want that dynamic contrast, you drop to the opposite. So, for example, it'd be loud, say for 64 bars, drop, and be 16 bars, 32 bars, whatever, you drop, and you'd be loud and soft. So but only these movements, and they'll be in a block section. So we're not going to move much within. So by the time we reach the romantic in 2 weeks, then we're going to do that. Now, the use of imitation cannot be overstated, because that's why I introduced you guys to counterpoint long ago, because here's where we're going to have to use those species very well. So they use imitation in the biggest sense from a counterpoint perspective. So it's a very, very important idea. And if you think of imitation, it's essentially like a delay. But what changes in a baroque is that these delays are not an exact delay. So in other words, they're not on the same pitch. They are changed in pitch. So you find it's common to have it by the an octave up, or a third, or a sixth. And there's all sorts of, for example, counterpoint rules, which is perhaps a bit beyond the scope of our discussion today. Things that's called double counterpoint or inverted counterpoint, if you guys want to look into that. Okay, of course, we use now tertiary harmonies, now common. And now, because of this system that allows us to modulate from anywhere to anywhere, we are essentially going to forget about the mode system. So we're not going to have 7 choices anymore. We're only going to have 2, major and minor. And within those 2, we can now modulate anywhere we like. Now, of course, the most common one is the 5th. So, for example, if you look in C, then you go from C to G. You're going to play your theme in C, and you're going to modulate it to G, and so on you can go. So the idea, you heard it in the earlier piece by Bach that I played for the organ, the sequence. So you've got one idea, and you're going to pitch it either up or down. And you'll see, I've shown you guys in the analysis that as well. Anyone know what basso continuo means? Continuous bass, yes, very good. A repeating bass pattern, yeah, it is like that, but it's a very specific thing. Now I'm going to show you guys this one. So I've given you guys this. The full video is on the classroom, and let's quickly look at a typical baroque opera orchestra, and you'll see. I'm just trying to find a shot. There's a good one. Past there. Trying to find you guys a nice shot so you can see it in overview. So you can see this is with choir. Okay, there we go. So here you can see we start to see the layout as we know it. This instrument, the harpsichord, is what is going to be known as the basso continuo. So as Solwazi said, it's the continuous bass, and this person, they wouldn't have had a conductor. So this is only John Baptiste Lully, and he was at the end of the Baroque period. He was a French composer and conductor, and he worked at Versailles. And so he unfortunately died of gangrene because because they had a cane, and he snapped it in his foot, and he passed away from that. But in this time period, there was no conductor per se at the start, and you'll see the harpsichordist essentially was the hi-hat. So this person would have kept everyone in time. What's very interesting for this time period is the player, very much like jazz, was supposed to improvise. So what would happen is the composer would write out music for these guys, and then many times the basso continuo, he would write out some rhythms, and he would just write the chord figures, what we call the figured bass. And so you remember in the Roman analysis, when I showed you guys, this is chord 1, 1, 6, 4, all of those. This would have been written at the bottom, and so the player had to figure out, oh, I'm using this voicing, I'm using that voicing. So this is the basso continuo. Now let's have a listen. You hear the harpsichord is really just keeping time and adding some textural element, because it's always going to be there, keeping time. And even with this smallish ensemble, You see, they don't have many parts. These are all historical instruments. You can hear they're starting to get quite a big sound. They'd be very ceremonious. They'd be expressive. So it's a very typical thing for the religious activities to have the vocal be very expressive. Now, what I want to do is to show you guys any questions. Repeating a bass pattern. Jock, it wouldn't be quite a repeating bass pattern because the pattern will change all the time. So it would rather be a continuous sound. So not quite a repeating bass pattern. Sometimes you'll find that there is a thing called the ground bass, and a ground bass, which is you will find, is actually a repeating pattern. So sometimes you'll find in organ works and so on. So Wazi, this is the era of counterpoint. So if you wonder what you should do for your composition, it is going to be counterpoint. It is guaranteed. So if you don't have counterpoint, you should probably go back to the drawing board, because this is the era of the heightened part of counterpoint as we know it. So I want to show you guys some of these instruments. So of course the harpsichord is now a big feature. So you can see the harpsichord, and it's really a continuous development from the clavichord, which was just a little box. And you can see there's a lot of, by the way, the people who study paintings like this is called iconography, and it's where you study paintings to find out what things, what objects look like. And so there's quite a lot of people who are interested in the field of what instruments would be like, or all sorts of other artifacts, because this is the only snapshot that we've got. Whether it's realistic or not, we can debate about it, but this is basically of this time period. They don't have photographs, so this is the only way we could determine what these instruments look like, except for those that survived. So now let's quickly listen to a bassoon from the time period.
Oh no, you know, then the bassoon will do something like, and it's like this, it's the same thing. It's the instrument saying, oh no, you know.
5th grade and middle school, I played this.
Okay, so this is a recorder.
The sound is really warm, and they can do things that the modern flute can't do. You can do really cool, crazy sounding trills, and some of them sound sort of bird-like.
And you can see this sounds very similar to the instruments that we are more familiar with. Here's a cello with 5 strings. You can see the bow looks different from the modern bow. You also see the one that
and this is my cello. It's a 5-string cello, which is rather unusual from the 17th century. On a Baroque cello, there's no end pin, and the end pin was an adaptation on the modern cello.
Okay, so you guys can watch about it, and so there's a tuning.
As the normal 4 strings as a cello, a modern cello, which is the C, the G, the D, the A. In addition, there's a high E string. So this is a very rare instrument to see from.
Okay, and then I want to show you guys how you can see this one. This is an excellent, this is called a natural horn. So the valve system has not been developed yet. And have a listen to this. Now, what you've just heard is the harmonic series that he's playing, and he's controlling it with his lip pressure. And you can see as he goes high, it's not easy to do. So these horns were very limited, and so many times you'll see the percussion would be linked to the horns because they could only play certain notes, and they had quite a clever system of getting around just the harmonic series. So for example, if this was in the key of F, they could play the harmonics on the F harmonic series, but then they wouldn't have other notes. So check this out.
So you can see that there's a lot of notes missing that there would be on a violin or a piano or in the voice. The method that was developed to play the notes in between is to insert the hand in the bell. This is really where the hand horn gets its name. And what we do is we actually close our hand by degrees inside the bell, open and close. And by using this method, we can actually get more notes between the open notes. So for every open note, we can close each one. So now we've effectively doubled the number of notes that we can play on this very simple instrument.
Okay, so then let's quickly hear the two of them together, where they play a little excerpt. So you would find it common that you would have many times in a piece, a composer would ask for different keys. So that, for example, let's say this one's in F and this one is in B flat, then we could have different pitches. And so the idea of a high horn and a low horn was born. And so we'll see the French horns work in this way as well. Of course, percussion instruments have been developed as well. So let's quickly have a look at those. So you'll see timpani is the main one, also known as the kettle drum.
The drums is most often associated with the trumpets. We're the loud guys, you know, the trumpets and the drums. This is a jingling Johnny. That's the English word for this instrument. It's originally from Turkey. All you do is shake it.
So this specific instrument you'll see people would use if they want to imitate the Orient, so the Middle East. So you wouldn't find it in other situations. Someone like Mozart, for example, many times composed Turkish marches and so on. So you'll find this from time to time, but it won't be around all the time. Now
The
let's
English
have a look at another
word
percussion
for this instrument.
Okay. And so you'll start to find all sorts of new drums, French drum.
We're accentuating or punctuating what's really important in the measure. Sometimes I play very little, but I feel that we're indispensable because there come those big moments in a piece where you really need the heavy stuff.
Okay. Any questions? How would the instrument be used? Well, essentially, David, the thinner string was added, Hakil. So sometimes you may find it that they would be, if they had to play a high passage, actually it would be much easier for them to play it then on the fifth string. But in modern times, it doesn't matter because the cellist can play essentially 2 octaves even above the highest note you could easily press because of harmonics, because the bows are much better. So in modern times, it doesn't matter anymore. You don't need 5 strings. You can just use 4 strings and just have excellent technique. Okay, so let's see. I want to then show you guys. So you guys are welcome to go and watch the whole video where they're explaining. This is the theorbo. So this is essentially an elongated version of the oud, which turned into the lute. You can see the frets there. You can see we don't have many frets, and then these are called bass extensions, so they're just there to extend the range. And so this would be a similar type of function to the harpsichord, and so you'll find it adds that sort of continuous sound. So not all ensembles would have had these because, as you can see, you need a lot of material to make this work. But you do find the theorbo common in this period of time. Okay. And then I want to play you guys some more music. So here, for example, is a piece called Le Cyclops.
Jean-Philippe Rameau, like most of the French keyboard composers of his day, utilized the rondo form quite a bit. And this Les Cyclopes is no exception. Les Cyclopes refers to the Cyclops Polyphemus, whom Ulysses injured with a sharpened twig when he tried to escape from the island where he was being held captive. This particular piece is to show the battle between Ulysses and Polyphemus, and Rameau also used it in one of his operas.
Now, before she plays, do you guys know what a rondo form means? Any ideas about what is rondo? So if you think about the word rond or round, so what's going to happen? Round, yes. So you're going to have, the way it works is you're going to have an A theme, then a B theme, A theme, C theme, A theme, D theme. And so you're going to have idea, counter idea, idea, counter idea. So it's a common, rather than just having, say, verse, chorus, which would be A and B, you can instead have, say, verse, chorus, something else, verse, something else. You can see a song structure many times have a similar thing to, say, you've got A, B, A, then we've got B again. So verse, chorus, verse, chorus. But let's say, for example, we had verse, chorus, verse, solo. Then it would have been a different idea. So it's more common in this time period where you'll start to see people don't use the verse, chorus idea, but there's all sorts of other forms. So let's have a listen. And you can see it's very virtuosic. Do you guys also see that we've got a double manual? So the harpsichord has no dynamic change because of the pluck mechanism. So we'll investigate how these work by next week, because then we'll have a quick look at how the piano developed, because it's such an important instrument. And there's actually a little lever at the bottom where you can hook on the two manuals. And so you could have a softer or louder sound because now it's basically plucking two sets of strings. So that's one way they could change dynamics on these instruments. That's the only option you had. And you can see it's very virtuosic. By the way, these are not very difficult to play because their mechanism is very, very soft. Not like a MIDI keyboard because they go not too deep, but it's very easy to get a note to move. As you can see, there's quite a virtuosic already. So when you write, you want to definitely think about adding quite a few notes to your piece. And then I think for our final one, before we look at our assignment, let's quickly maybe look at, say, the Vivaldi. So Vivaldi, famous composer. And so he wrote the Four Seasons and 38 bassoon concertos and 500 concertos in full. So you see this famous work. You can hear that whole niceness. I'm sure you guys have heard this. Okay, so I'd highly recommend that you guys do listen to the music that I've given you guys and that you put yourself into it. See, in questions. All right. So let's then go to our so you've got all of these ones, and so your instrument selection will be much wider. I've got trumpet and organ, timpani, violoncellos, more traditional instruments as we know them. They're all available to us. They may not be as well developed as we have them today, but they are very capable for their time as well. Okay, let's then have a look at our TV opening title. So you guys will, the way it's going to work is you can choose between 4. So there's 4 videos available and you just need to choose one. I'm going to give it to you guys so you can watch it in your own time, but I'll just show you guys on Classroom. So if we go to our Classroom section, you'll see there's our TV opening sequence. Briefs in there, and there's all 4 videos. They have no sound in them. So you'll see you can choose then one of these 4. So if you want to choose House of Cards, Halt and Catch Fire, Star Trek Discovery, or True Detective, that's up to you. You can decide which one you want to do. So there's no specific genre. So you need to come up with, if say for example you choose one of them, you need to decide. Let's say you choose True Detective or whatever. You need to think of what is the specific sound that is going to be fitting towards it. So you need to make it suitable for the genre, dramatic action of the visuals, and you need to keep the music true to the time period. So for example, you can't just let's say for example like you say True Detective and you're going to add disco to it, for example. It might work, but it probably won't. No sound effects or voiceover may be added. Then you can use orchestral elements, but you can add any contemporary thing. So there's no this specific description about what you should and shouldn't do. Then you should make use of sort of a leitmotif we'll discuss when we get to the romantic period. But leitmotif is essentially a motif that we associate with something. So here, this is the thing that we're going to associate with this production. So you want to have some clear motivic idea, because otherwise, how will we know this production is playing? Then all the usual stuff where we've got, you guys got to give that in. Feedback will do. I'll give you guys the date in a moment. Then no less than 1,000 words and a 2,000 word report. And then we'll do it in our exam presentation, if Corona doesn't ruin everything for us. And then project planning, you'll get your document and there's your report layout. Is there any questions regarding the assignment? The 10 songs you've heard, but you don't know the name of. Is there a video for the Baroque composition? Yes, good question, Ryan. Absolutely. So you'll see under the portfolio submission 3 for the historical series, there's your project planning guide, and then you'll see there's your video as well. Let's quickly see our time. We've got plenty. So here's a good example actually of the, this is Versailles, and you'll see this is an excellent example of how this type of architecture would look like. Let me just play you guys the video from the folder. There we go. And so this is this one, and so it's going to look like this. So you need to come up with music that's going to match these spectacular visuals. You can see it's very grand, big scale. You can see it's a long shot. You need to think carefully of movement. You can see the ornateness even on the roof outside. Show you how much power they have. Of course, the video will feel long without any music. That's where you come in. This is very ornate, over the top. Okay, so that's your video for next week then. Please remember to submit your draft today for the Renaissance. Okay, so that's that video. Okay, let's see what else we can explore. We've got about 10 minutes for the Baroque. So guys, I would highly recommend that you do go back through the those week 4 ones for counterpoint, to show you guys how many composers there is, and these are just known composers. There would have been many more. So if you guys, I'll give you this one as well, so you can see there's quite a lot of composers in this time period, and there's actually many more, but these are the more well-known ones. So you can see Handel, Bach. By the way, they're all born in the same year, Bach, Scarlatti, and Handel. So let's listen then to some Handel, because he is another very well-known, let's say we choose a water music. Let's have a listen to this one. You'll hear the refinement. You can hear there's an emphasis on a higher note. So even though we do have the availability of lower pitches, which they do use, they don't focus on them. So it's only by the time we get to the romantic that you'll hear that we start to have these lower sounds. So you can still hear the tessitura, the range is still in the higher range, where we focus in on the melodic proportion or the melodic focus. Something like that. And you can hear the imitation between these things. One set, another set, one set, another set. You can hear this harmony as well, like a tonic, and then you get like a harmonophonic texture, so all of them playing together. And you hear it's very common at the end of a phrase to have those trills. So I'll just play that part for you again so you guys can hear. So well, I would highly recommend you add trills, mordants, all of those goodies, turns. And you hear it's not on all instruments, so maybe there's 2 instruments that's going to be unified together, and then they're going to do the trilling together. So this is something you would definitely want to do. Let's quickly listen to the end of the piece, and then we can listen to another piece. And so you see there's a nice example of a cadence. Anyone know which cadence it is? Okay, let's see if you guys know which cadence it is. Oops. Perfect cadence. Thank you very much, Ryan. Yes, perfect cadence. So very good example of that where it feels like it's complete. 5-1. Yes, coolio. Nice one, Ryan. Okay, let's listen to another piece. This one's organ concerto by Handel as well. By the way, in this specific one, the counterpoint he does use, but it's not like it's he uses more harmonic texture. And so here, let's listen to some organ concertos by Handel. There's the sequence. You can hear it's the same idea as just going down. Do you hear we also use lots of scales? And you can hear in all of these, we have completely moved away from the mode system. So it's now either major or minor, none of the other modes anymore. So please don't write any modes anymore, because they actually would still find them sometimes, but they wouldn't be specifically like this Baroque style. So you'll even find that Beethoven wrote pieces in Lydian, but they would be very, very specific for specific functions. So by and large, you will not find it in the time period. And you hear it's a light texture, so we focus on the higher sound, short sounds to create this light texture. And of course, the organ is very capable of imitating lots of different instruments. And you have very ornate, lots of trills and frills. So So your composition should be full of these things. Don't overdo it, of course, but you want to definitely make sure that you've got quite a few of them in line. Do you guys have any final questions? How do you determine if the trill is used? Okay, that's a good question. The trill is just going to, you'll hear the and you usually hear the same note at the end, and you know it's a perfect cadence. So what do you want to say?
In this style, do they also have that issue like the previous one where they have like 2-time signatures?
You will find it very rare. In fact, it's only something you'll see again in the 20th century commonly. So you wouldn't find it much.
Okay, and here like everything is time bound.
You can hear it's much more metrical now, so you can almost start to hear it's more organized because, by the way, this type of music has a lot of, for example, like Bach, is called process music. So if you think of a fugue, for example, a fugue would be you've got a specific rule. You then have a process, you put the whole piece through the process, and then basically when the process is finished, you have a composition. So lots, say for example, like Bach, he's very, he loves the process a lot. So lots of this music is going to have a very, you can hear it's almost a bit stiff. That's why some people don't like the Baroque. It's almost, you know, it's not as fluid. So when we get to a classical period, you'll hear things are a bit more flowing, and the Romantic period as well. So you can hear things are a bit more rigid. Yes, so it's a good point, somewhat. Any other questions, guys? So you can hear things are more complex. Yeah, we're going to take a break now, and then I'll see you then at 11 for APP. Right. Of course, if you've got other questions, you can ask me later as well. And of course, then next week, Thursday, for this one. So I'll see you guys. Everyone has APP. I'll see you soon. So take a quick break, and then I'll see you at 11. Hope you enjoyed it.